Hello and welcome to the Sideline Live podcast. My name is Orla Keeling and I am the host of the podcast, where every week we bring you a brand new episode with guests ranging from Olympic champions to local heroes, coaches, support staff and anybody involved in the world of sport. Each week we will dive into different topics, including current affairs in sport, identity, skill, mindset, coaching, and also shine a light on those flying under the radar. So tune in every week for brand new episodes, new stories, and new insights you've never heard before. Okay, delighted to be joined by Sharon Madigan. Sharon, thanks a million for joining the podcast, but also for having me. We're currently in the Sport of Ireland Institute in Blanchardstown.
Not at all. Welcome to Blanchardstown.
In terms of your background, I wasn't sure where to start, but I did read online you have a basketball background, is it?
I have, yes. I see you have a lot of podcasts on the old basketball. I was looking at it over the weekend, some very good players around at the moment, and Claire Mila is doing great work at the moment, isn't she?
Yeah, she's flying it. She's a European final now Wednesday, so can't wait. It's all to play for as well, only a 3-point.
She got a bit of a head.
She did, yeah. Yeah, doesn't get any calls from the refs either.
Zero calls.
Yeah. In terms of your playing career then, when did you start to focus and try balance a professional career in sport but also be competitive, or was that a challenge?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I played probably up the whole way through university. Now, some people would say you were in university longer than most people, which is very true. And I went back actually to do a PhD in Jordanstown. So I'd played for Coleraine at club level when I left Donegal, and then I was there for so long. We had relatively good. There was a good league in the north at that stage as well, and I played very small time when I went to Belfast first, some national league, but not really a huge amount, and then really stuck more on the club side. And then I was coaching most recently with my kids with Phoenix, that from that point of view it was great. So I suppose that's how I got interested in sport, not only from obviously, it was all of the club type stuff. I had loads of jobs as secretary, chairperson, treasurer, all of the kind of admin-y type stuff. But actually what you found at that level when we were in university was you were meeting like-minded people from other sports, rugby, GA, soccer, etc., etc. And actually the people that you met then, I have subsequently continued to kind of bump into those people professionally in different jobs, and from networks that you wouldn't even think, so it's from that point of view it was great.
I asked Jackie Hurdy about this and trying to manage sport and like the relationship with sport. How has that changed for you going through beginning from sport to now, and how has that evolved, your relationship with sport?
Well, it's much more professional. I mean, that's the difference. I suppose I was playing it and being involved in it because I loved it. I loved the atmosphere. I loved the team element of things. Loved the crack. I wouldn't say now we were the best in the world, to be honest. When you went to varsities and stuff like that, I mean, you used to really dread Limerick, etc. But I think that's the bit about sport that I love, that there's a place in it for everybody. Doesn't matter how good or not so good you are. And it's the kind of lessons learned in terms of, working with others, that team element of things, certainly in the sport that I've come from. It's understanding that people work in different ways. And I think all of those skills, doesn't matter what you go on to do, I mean, they're absolutely brilliant for life skills, really. So from my point of view, that's kind of some of the skills I learned. Meeting in I suppose nowadays it's so professional. I mean, that's the difference, and what I mean by that is, training's professional, the support teams around, even your clubs are nobody knew that if you ate better and drank more water, you could actually not feel as if you were absolutely punctured at a training session. I mean, God only knows some of the shapes we arrived in for training. So I mean, just the whole science around sport has absolutely blown up over the last 20 years as well. So people didn't know any better. You know, that's the difference, I suppose, at that level. And there was no jobs in sport, really. I suppose, how did I get to be in my current job? I mean, when I was studying, there was no university courses for sports nutrition, none. This came through the British Dietetic Association, who had a kind of a link with Loughborough, and they put together a special interest course. And only university courses have only started in the last 10, 12 years. I mean, the Sports Institute in Belfast started up just as I was starting my PhD. And they didn't have any nutritionists and didn't want to employ any nutritionists either. S&C was really the core, and physio obviously. And they do continue to be the core, you know, support around people training, because they have to be on the ground all the time.
So do you still think we're in the infancy stage of sports science and nutrition, and kind of the broader, away from the traditional roles of, as you mentioned, physio and S&C in Ireland?
Well, I suppose if you were to measure that against the amount of full-time jobs there are in sports nutrition, if that's going to be your barometer of where are we at, I mean, I think I could count on two hands. So that's not really a sustainable, you know, the reality is, to get a full-time job in sports nutrition, it's going to be very difficult, you know. Not that the need is there, and the appetite, pardon the pun, is there, but the money is just not there to support. And I mean, if I look at who I would be drawing my, you know, the people that might be able to support this, I mean, I'm up against, you know, dietitians working for the HSE. They're not going to leave full-time jobs with the HSE potentially to come into, you know, do 2 evenings a week with whatever, you know.
Yeah, it's very hard to find a secure full-time role. So I'll ask you, how did you find it? Because we've hundreds of people, you know, being qualified every year with all these courses that have now started. So how did you get into this role, and how did you make it from, even like we were talking about athletes making it, but to work in sport, you kind of have to make it as well. Like, how did you manage to do it?
I suppose, as I said, I was starting my PhD at the same time as the institute opened in Belfast, in Jordanstown. I didn't want a full-time job at that point because I was doing something else, but they wanted somebody in terms of a consultancy to, if they had athletes that needed it, and myself, and at the time Ruth Wood Martin, who subsequently went on to be the head of nutrition for the RFU, and she just retired a few years ago. So the two of us actually did probably the equivalent of maybe, it was a very small amount of time, but we were there and I was on campus, so it was easy. So, and then actually in 2002, and that's going back, I was interviewed by Gary Keegan and Giles Warrington for a position of nutritionist with the Irish high performance boxing team, and that was 10 days a year. 10 Saturdays a year. That's where we started, and I suppose that increased with time, and then we also had the and it's now the carding system, but NCTC, as it was back in the day in Limerick, had a system where they had lots of practitioners signed up to their who athletes could, but therein lies the difficulty. The athletes weren't funded for that. They would have had to pay for that out of their own money, and I mean, there was no joined up thinking. I wouldn't have known who the physio that was working with them was. I wouldn't have known wouldn't have known the coaches, would have known. So I mean, but that was going there, and that's how a lot of practitioners were probably getting small amounts of work. And then that in 2010, I started to work here, and again it was, I think, 18 days overall, and that has just grown, and we now have a team of, I think, maybe 8 of us, across all different sports, with different contracts as well, some of them full-time, some of them part-time.
So what's that been like? Like, we're sitting in this lovely building and this lovely campus we were talking about before we recorded. What's it like then seeing like the boxing team going from 10 days to now that what it is now, this machine of bringing in these amazing athletes and producing them, like, and across other sports as well. What's that been like for you to see not only the growth within certain sports, but overall there seems to be a huge move?
Yeah, I mean, like whenever sports recognise that there's a need and we can deliver on that, because if you don't deliver results, you're not going to be wanted, you know. So, and I mean, it's different, you know, again within sports, you might have some successes with some athletes and very little with others, and that comes down to personalities. It comes down to, you know, and I've been that person that has moved out of either a sport or moved away from certain athletes because the relationship just wasn't working for them, or we weren't getting results. So you have to try and work somebody else in there that can get a better result. So I suppose I'm long enough now in the tooth to recognise that pretty quickly and to make the changes if you need to do it. You have to get the results. I mean, you have to make, I suppose, the PDs and the coaches and the athletes recognise that this can work for them. And I suppose there's a kind of, there's two things going on. We're obviously thinking about their short, medium and long-term health as well, because nutrition's one of those ones that obviously performance is number 1, 2 and 3. But without health, you don't have performance. So a lot of our athletes have, you know, we're looking at managing performance, but also managing maybe other things like celiac disease or, you know, iron deficiency anemia, or, you know, there's lots of those things going on. But the challenge or the good thing is doing that as part of a wider team where you have the doctors, you have the physios, because the S&C or the physio will pick up that there's an issue and then they bring it back to you.
One of the things, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but retirement in sport is probably something that we don't talk enough about, I think, and I want to do a couple of episodes on it and stuff. But from a nutritional point of view, you see when the likes of the NFL players and the NBA, just who I follow, and there's probably better examples in Ireland, but I've heard them speak about they would have been eating, you know, thousands and thousands of calories, and then a lot of them unfortunately probably just, you know, they get a lot bigger because the calorie burn they're not burning those same amount of calories, they're eating the same. What's the biggest challenge for athletes when they finish? Let's say, for example, I was an athlete in Paris and I'm done and I've now retired. You know, is there support there post kind of career?
We have an athlete transition program. So athletes will be offered support over a period of time, 6 to 12 months. And, you know, when they transition out of that, they're link in with our life skills team and identify areas that they particularly want support in. And we've had a number of athletes that want support in nutrition, so transitioning into, and I mean, it's really difficult because food and how you eat and when you eat and all of that is to do with habit and routine and all of those things. And sometimes it can be more tricky for some people than others, you know. But you would hope that if you have a relationship with an athlete, you can maybe identify what the issues that they might come across. So, for example, you know, a lot of athletes will struggle with the fact that they won't be as fit or they won't physically maybe be in the same shape as they might have been. Now, you might question, was that a healthy shape in the first place? Because some athletes are trying to achieve things that are long term, maybe not sustainable. So it's balancing the psychology as well as the physical element of things that can often be quite tricky.
When I've interviewed a number of athletes, the biggest lesson or insight I've kind of tried to put in a sentence is you're trying to maximize it and hit the edge without going over the edge. And is that the biggest challenge, is finding that line and not going over it?
Finding that sweet spot. Yeah. And that's challenging for us because what they might be trying to do, I mean, very few people would be able to do it. And I mean, I've had conversations, I mean, many years ago, I remember myself and one of the doctors said, elite sport is not good for your health. Anybody that thinks that it is, I mean, it's not. from here, from head to toe, it's not good for your health, you know. So it's about balancing, you know, the risks and having an eye on what the potential problems are down the line. And I mean, one of the big areas that we're very conscious of is bone health, because you can't see it. Right, you can't see them, you can't feel them, and if you can, you have trouble. And the problem that we have is that, you know, you're trying to maximise your bone health up as good as it can be. By the age of 20, you've paid into your bone pension, and when you come to 50, you're going to use that pension, you know. And if the deposits haven't been made when athletes are younger, then, you know, you're starting off from a very low base. So it is going to be, you know, that's some of the things that we're mindful of, and you know, but again, when you're 19 or 18 or 14 or 21 or 22, it's not really things you're thinking about.
Yeah. Is that an education piece that is, do you think it's necessary to bring this in when, like, let's say, for example, I'm 20 years of age and all I want to do is go to LA or to Melbourne or to Brisbane, and, you know, that's I'm tunnel vision, I'm on that, but, you know, is there a conversation of, look, Orla, beyond that, you know, we're looking at life? Is that a part of it?
You have to. I mean, I mean, it's not, it's sometimes they do, I mean, and there's listening and hearing as well, you know, so, but you have to do that because you have a responsibility.
There's a balance to be found as well of, as you said, listening and hearing, you know, there's more to life than the Olympics and post, you know, whether it's Rugby World Cup or Soccer World Cup, where there is a life after sport, and you have to really set yourself up for that without killing yourself early.
100%. And I mean, these are all the things that also will keep longevity in the athlete's life as well. I mean, if they start getting injured, you know, that's going to be the things that, you know, is going to end their career potentially, you know, whether it's that or something else, you know.
Totally. When we look at, and I love asking guests this question from a wide variety of backgrounds, like, I'm always fascinated by why certain athletes make it and certain don't. And a lot of the time it's maybe the ones that weren't as talented as the rest kind of make it. But interesting from your point of view, obviously, aside from these, you know, catastrophic injuries or freak accidents, stuff like that, what's the biggest barrier to athletes reaching their potential?
That's a really hard question. Do you know the interesting one that I've seen recently? Perfectionism. Okay. I think it's a big issue for a lot of people, thinking they have to be perfect at everything, and it really has derailed a number of people that I actually have seen that it has, you know, completely scuppered them, to be honest. And you do find, I mean, obviously there's a happy medium here. There's personalities, types, let's say, for example. I mean, I'm never going to be an elite athlete. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I was that person that, you know, I never aimed for an A, okay. Right? Yeah. If I got my pass and got whatever I got, I mean, that was great. But that was, if you look at the bigger picture, there's lots of other things there. I mean, again, there's a lot of people that are very good at what they do, but actually it's trying to be perfect in every aspect is exhausting. And actually that has, you know, that has caused major difficulties, you know. So again, it's that, and quite often, I mean, some of the issues that we would see, I mean, you never see them, and you only see them in A-star students or A-star people, you know, because that's what gives them that edge. That's the good bit. Yeah. But it's balancing that with the other bits that, you know, can potentially, and that would just be, I mean, that's a small opinion here. Yeah. You know, there's many other things, but it's doing it well, but not trying to push so much into it that it derails other aspects of your life that actually derails you in the first place, you know.
Yeah, totally. That reminds me of an anecdote that David Gillick shared. I think it was Beijing, and he was preparing for it, and he got an iPod Nano, and he got inscribed on the back to be perfect, and he said that derailed him, and he went into Beijing, didn't perform, said he was unwell, put everything in, and then just didn't get the rewards because he was trying to be perfect and couldn't sustain it for, you know, for a long period. And then he said to himself, I'm going to get him on. Not that he fell apart, but it didn't go well because he was put all of his eggs there and just didn't work out.
Yeah, I mean, it is tricky. It's very, very hard to kind of find where that sweet spot is, isn't it? And I mean, I think you've said it really well there. It's often not the best individuals. It's how they've put the whole package together that, you know, they perform better maybe, or there's more longevity in it.
Totally, and that's what I think Paul McGinley had a great episode on the High Performance podcast, and he said he talked to a coach, a golf coach, I think it was the University of Washington, and he said, Paul said that I did a college course, I worked for a year, then I went to the Q school and then qualified, progressed to the professional ranks, versus the coach in America wanted all of his athletes to be golf is the only thing I want. And Paul said, well, having my background allowed me to be the best I could be because I had that fallback plan. But again, it probably goes back to personality of that A type versus the type of Paul where the security of the other background allows them to be their best. And again, it goes back to the individual. So I'll pose a question to you. How do you find the balance of the individuals when you're dealing with so many different personalities in different sports?
I mean, you just have to try and find what the carrot is that's motivating them to pick up on the things that we're trying to do with them. So I mean, it is trying to, you know, build relationships and see them as an individual as well, not just their sport. I mean, they're the kind of things that you get more information out of, you know, or you can actually delve deeper without, you know, people realising what you're doing. I mean, I suppose I've been lucky enough. I've worked in the NHS. I've done a PhD. I've been in academia. I mean, there's multiple different life skills that I've learnt. Excuse me. And I suppose, I mean, the bit is that you're taking all of those skills and trying to pick out what are the things that are going to work with this particular individual. What does that look like? It's going to look very different in different. I mean, I remember doing a shopping trip, let's say, for a team that was going. I can't remember. In fact, was it maybe they were going somewhere? We call them the stands. They were going somewhere over there, and I remember going into Tesco's and doing the shopping for this team that was heading away, and it was going to actually be freighted up and sent out as well. Number one, the lady behind the till said, is there something that you know that I don't? Because it looked as if I was going to be battening down the hatches for a number of months and there's some kind of like warfare happening. But also, if I had done the same shop for an athletics team, I would have been thrown out. You know, so it's about knowing the individuals and what works. And you know, we had obviously the Barry's tea, and we had we had a couple of the Kimberley Mikado's coconut, you know, those type of things. But if I'd put some of those in with athletics, where you know you needed a couple of goji berries and stuff thrown in, I mean, if I had done the same shop, they would have just and vice versa.
Yeah, totally.
So it's kind of knowing your audience as well, and how to kind of win them over a little bit. And listen, it doesn't work all the time, and that's where you know when you have to step away and somebody else will do a better job.
Yeah. So you've answered the Barry's versus Lions debate as well, is it?
Barry's was kind of it is always the top choice.
Okay, very good. Let's say, for example, I'm taking the Olympics as an example, and I'm conscious there's also other competitions. I was just there and fascinated by the village. And the food hall is one of the things that people talk about a lot. In terms of preparing for Paris, let's say, and we can look to LA and beyond, but in terms of the planning and the logistics beyond in that, like, is there much correspondence between, like, do you know what's happening in the food hall? Obviously, you know, the different elements. Talk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, the food hall got a bit of bad press, to be honest. And I mean, to be brutally honest, nobody was expecting that because it was France. Yeah. You know, that was the reality. We were expecting the French food. I mean, it is their thing, and they just couldn't deal with the volume of food, the volume of people when the numbers ramped up. They just couldn't deal with the volume. That was the biggest starting problem. The secondary problem was this was to be a sustainable games. So obviously there was a significant focus on a plant-based diet, which is perfect and there's no problems with that. But what they failed to do was they failed to recognise that they had based their animal protein on just athlete numbers and not the rest of the support team that was also within the village setup as well. So, I mean, you had athletes coming in the evening times, particularly that first week when you had rugby sevens on. I mean, so you had your rugby, you had your swimmers coming in, you had your, the basketballers weren't there, so that wasn't, but I mean, all of these massive units that needed big volumes, and there just wasn't anything there. Yeah. So they were behind the curve before they started. Yeah. So trying to get that back was always going to be an impossibility, because then you had chatter and, social media, and everybody recognised they had something that they could potentially blame, or, so once they lost it, I mean, it was very, very hard for them to get that back. And I mean, I don't know how many meetings we had So I was involved and have been involved in menu setting for a number of different Olympic Games. So there's a worldwide group that looks at the menus pre and post every Olympics, does an evaluation, looks at then being the advisory committee then for the Olympics going forward. And I mean, very quickly we had people that were on the ground, and we were, I mean, I think the first Friday or Saturday, we had meetings within the in the canteen to try and sort out. I mean, you had chicken that was raw, you had food safety issues. Now their cheese selection and their pastry selection was lovely. But yeah, I mean, and listen, that did improve, but I just think from looking at it, once they lost it, it was very hard for them to get that back on.
Yeah, and when you even mention maybe excuses, and when athletes look, if they don't do well, they can say, oh, it was the food and stuff. But the way I look at it as well is, and I just find the Olympics is, it's your whole life. Everyone says the 4-year cycle, it's your whole life. And if you happen to get something wrong, if something goes wrong on the day or the day before, you've trained your whole life for this moment. And the reality is, obviously the last cycle was 4 years to LA. Your life is on hold for another 4 years, and it's those small things that can go wrong and derail you. Like, what do you do in that moment when you hear, oh, there's not enough food? Like, was there anything you did on the ground?
Well, I suppose we were relatively lucky as well in that they had, as well as the main canteen and one that was further on over, they had kind of food trucks positioned in various different places, and actually there was one outside our building which was really good, particularly in the morning time, because you were able to get a kind of egg muffin type breakfast. There was croissants and coffee, most importantly, and then we did have porridge with us. We had various snack items and bits and pieces, nothing major, and I mean, again, it was the advice to athletes: try and get down there. If you're going to be late, let's think about how we're going to support that. Myself and Gavin would have done a good bit there was a lot of shopping went on. And I suppose it was that piece of, actually consider that there is another dining hall, and you can cycle over to that. Don't, but it was probably those teams, I think rugby were particularly, they were, because of the times the matches finished at as well, and coming back, and I know the nutritionists that work with them did a bit of work in terms of trying to put strategies and solutions.
I even remember, Gavin, I think he mentioned someone, I don't know who, someone from the support staff had to run to the shop to Lidl and get a yogurt, and I was in
Lidl all the time.
You were just firefighting.
Or Aldi or whatever one. We mentioned a number of different brands there, Costco or whatever. Yeah. I mean, yogurts, we had a fridge. We were lucky enough to have a fridge in our recovery room, and I mean, it was packed with, because again, you had athletes who have very specific requirements around what they like or want, and I mean, I would have come, and the problem is you couldn't carry out food out of the canteen. You can't take anything out now. I mean, there was a few things smuggled out for sure, but there would have been a good bit of shopping done for those milk, your bits and pieces, and I would have raided the ice cream, and Twisters was a popular one on the really hot days. So we had a load of those in our own freezer so people could just come down and get them.
Very good. So there is still an element, no matter how much planning and you know, predicting with certain things, there is a bit of firefighting on the day.
A little bit. I mean, at the end of the day, food is always going to be an issue, right? If it's bad, everybody's in trouble. So when you get it good, you're always on a winning. You're straight away on the pig's back. And the big thing that you're always thinking about in the back of your head is nobody gets sick. Nobody gets food poisoning on your watch, because if that happens, I mean, you're, touch wood, you're in trouble as well. You know, and I remember in Rio, in our camp in Uberlandia, we were supposed to have the same camp as, I think it was, I can't remember if it was Finland or Denmark, or there was definitely another group coming, and then they changed hotels and they went to another hotel, and 4 of their athletes got food poisoning and were out of the games. And the sweat was lashing off me. I was like, oh my God. Yeah. Wow. And it is there, but the grace of God. You know, that you do have to be, I mean, that is the things that you're worried about, for sure. So when you see chicken and you cut it and it's still raw in the middle, just because the French eat it that way, doesn't mean that we do. And we wouldn't risk that. You know, we asked the chefs to do temperature testing, you know, on that. And I mean, there are things like, you know, allergen. There was allergens. So if you've somebody with an allergy, a real true allergy, going and getting something that they shouldn't have, I mean, that's very problematic. Yeah.
In terms of the most difficult games to manage, I'm assuming was Tokyo, because of the COVID element to it. Give us an insight into what that was like.
I mean, we were particularly lucky actually, because we had a camp in a place called Fukuroi, which was about an hour and a half from Tokyo itself. And because we were the only ones in there, we actually had a bubble. So we had a lot more freedom than lots of other people had. Now, within the village environment, it was a little bit different. So, I mean, the food element was tricky enough to manage in that it was unlike other games where the canteen or the dining hall becomes a real, I suppose, social part of the games as well, and that just wasn't there at all. But from our point of view, I mean, we were exceptionally lucky. We stayed in a hotel that was, I mean, unbelievable. Will never be matched on any level, you know. And because we didn't have the ability to do some of the cultural things, we actually used food quite a bit in that cultural piece. So some days we would have had sushi making classes. We put on ramen, you know, 2 or 3 times a week, a ramen station. There would have been sushi a couple of times a week. You know, so we were in this area. I suppose the closest thing to in Ireland would be like a county. It was a prefecture, and what they were best known for was these melons that cost about €300 each. Yeah. So on one of the evenings, the council, for want of a better word, or the mayor of the area, put on an evening with the melons, so to speak. So they paid for these melons, everybody to get some melon. Right. And I remember seeing one of the athletes coming down with a plate like the size of melon. And I said, do you understand that you have about €1,500 worth of melon on your plate? Can you eat it? Make sure you eat every single last bit of that and don't leave any of it. Because these people are looking at you. And I mean, the plate was huge. It was topped up like that. Now, they were beautiful. Yeah. But €300 for a melon? But these were, I mean, really, you know, it's well known through Japan. And I mean, it was fantastic.
That's amazing. And I like the way you added in the cultural elements, because there was a challenge of COVID and different stuff, but having those little pieces probably meant a lot as well, and a bit of variety and stuff.
That's it. And I mean, you know, again, we had athletes that wouldn't touch fish within an inch of their lives, but when we did the sushi, we were able to kind of say, listen, you're never going to get an opportunity like this again. I mean, this is actually a trained sushi chef This is a trained chef that, I mean, you're never going to get sushi like this ever again. You're never going to get fish like this ever again. I mean, there were some days we had lobster tail. They were, I mean, it was really hard to,
Convince them of that, I'd say.
Convince them that they needed to leave there. That was the bit that was funny. I mean, you do have to leave, and you won't be getting this in any other camp that you'll ever be in your life.
But isn't it amazing that even when you speak about that hotel and that experience, the hotel being key, the food truck being key, all these what would seem to be small elements really set the foundation for success.
100%. If you get that right, everybody's happy. And that's what you're looking to try and do. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why we try to provide food, albeit very small, here a few days a week. I mean, it would be one of the things we would look to try and do more of. But, you know, if you think about it, the kitchen is the heart of the home. And if you try and instill that into an environment like this, where maybe people are away from home, or they're having a bad day, or they don't have their own support network around them, I mean, it's you're kind of socially doing small things that hopefully help support, you know, life, number one, and then that then goes into, you know, a happier athlete is a better performing athlete.
Totally. The other role you have as well is science lead.
Yeah, that was the role I had for Paris. So it was a slightly extended role in that we were there. Effectively, Paris was a home games for us. And I mean, we were able to double down on the services that athletes get here in the Institute. And the idea being that you just move your services to the competition, and, you know, there's no difference, and it's seamless. And these are some of the things that we've identified over the years that is the best way of supporting athletes, that they don't see that there's any difference between Abbottstown or Paris. They can, and again, some services will be more than just their nutrition. There will be a person to go and have a coffee with, or physio. It'll be a chat or an arm around the shoulder. There'll be lots of other things that you bring more than just your ology with you. So for the first time ever, we had a relatively small recovery area where we were able to kind of have our own you know, cooling elements of things, because that was one of the big things we were very worried about. We prepared for significant heat and prepare for the worst and hope for the best, really. And I mean, there were a number of days. One of the days the hockey players went out, and I mean, I think it was 45 on the ground, you know, so you're talking very warm conditions. Some of the rowers had significant heat to deal with as well. So we obviously had our support services within the village, but we also had support up at the rowing venue as well. So, you know, we had bikes, we had ice bath, we had freezer, fridges, slushy machines, physio, reformer machine, you know, so we put it in as I said, it was relatively small compared to maybe some of the other nations, but it meant that they didn't have to go elsewhere to get access. So, I mean, yes, an athlete could have walked further on down, but all of that takes time and it eats into that recovery. So you know, small things can make a big difference there, and we definitely got good feedback that athletes and the teams valued our input as well.
Yeah, I think what we talked about a little bit before we recorded was it brings that feel into it, where they feel like, you know, if someone is making a jump to the Olympic level for the first time or professional level, it's like, I feel like a professional. It's not just the actual energy saving that Gavin spoke about, where Kelly's just taking her time walking around. It's also the feel of, yes, we're Ireland, we're a small nation, but, you know, we now have those, you know, those little key things, you know, like the recovery room and those little feels that it's like, right, we're here and we're here to compete.
Yeah, and that's the bit that you're looking to do, is put things in place that will help, you know, whatever it is, you know, if that means that you have to get whatever in Lidl or Costco or Aldi or where Tesco's, mention them all, then yeah, do it, because it's not a big cost in the big scheme of things, and it allows the focus to be on what they're there to do, you know.
Yeah. In terms of comparing, if you could compare, let's say, the two latest home games, which would have been London and Paris, because it's very hard to particularly Tokyo, it's very hard to compare that because of the COVID element, and Rio is obviously in South America. What was the biggest evolution between London and Paris?
I mean, I didn't think that anything could beat London, and Paris I think did. I mean, obviously the results, but I mean, there was good results in London too. I mean, I think we were able to have, I think that team environment, that camp environment does help. You're not only bringing athletes together from their own sports, but you're bringing them from other sports as well. And there's that kind of the Team Ireland kind of ethos, which is quite nice, really. So, and I think the ability for athletes to, I mean, in London we were based in Teddington near, and we had a so athletes were able to come and go there as well, and actually athletes were able to maybe stay there a bit longer before they actually went into the village environment, which can be a wee bit overwhelming at times and things have changed there where the village now becomes a performance environment, not just if you're out on the first day or whatever you would stay on. I mean, you have a period of time there and then you do go and you can enjoy the rest of the games, but it is that focus on performance as well, which I think is really important, and that probably is the big thing that Paris, obviously everybody in London was there to perform as well, but I think that piece around performance is very much ingrained, and again, the team that was with everybody in Paris is the team that they work with generally on a day-to-day basis as well.
Yeah, so it's an element of the evolution of
well.
exactly, and the expectation and the amount of, like Gavin spoke about, we had 12 moments that equal, into our medals, but the more moments, the more chance of a medal. But we probably were, not to discredit anyone that went to London, but we were probably in a more chances of more medals going to Paris.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it, and it goes back to probably that first question, we've evolved from then, as a system, and it's a much more sophisticated system than it was back then, and you're starting to see all of those things now. It's a job, you do your job properly, and everybody has a job to do, so there's lots of things that are and are you able to put your finger on lots of different things? Probably not, and some of them are very subtle, and maybe if you weren't in either one of the environments you might not even be able to see it, but I think we've just evolved since then as well.
What's the hardest thing? Let's say I go to the Olympics for the first time and I'm in the village. What's the hardest thing for me to grasp, generally speaking of,
I think that'll be different for different people.
Okay. What are the different things you've seen?
I mean, it could be overwhelming for people. I mean, you could be having lunch beside Nadal, or whoever your idol is, and that's the reality. So for some people that's, and they're too busy worrying about who they're going to see or get a picture with. So that can take eyes off the ball a little bit. Other people are just maybe overwhelmed by the pressure, or maybe make it into more than, again, it's trying to do the same things all the time, because it doesn't matter if you're in Dublin or Paris or whatever. If you can try and keep that consistency going and not change that, then you don't let other things come in on top of you that maybe then has an impact where you might feel the pressure, where if you didn't, you might perform a wee bit better. Yeah. It's going to be different for different people, I think.
Totally. And how do you develop consistency as an athlete? I spoke to a couple of guests about this before. Just interested in your take. What is consistency and how do you develop it?
I mean, I think it's interesting for me, like we look in terms of nutrition, and it would be the same for lots of other things. A lot of people focus on the outcome and they forget about the journey to get there. And that's a disaster, I think, and I think that consistency comes from doing boring things well and keep doing them, and doing it depending, it doesn't matter where you're at. I think they're the kind of things, and some of the things in terms of what we're trying to achieve in some sports, people are looking at their physicality, or they're looking at their weight, or they're looking at but they haven't looked at how they're going to get there, and that's how it doesn't go right for them, you know. So if we can try and focus on the process and the journey, then and obviously using the information that they're giving you as well, because if you know that kind of definition of insanity is continuing to do the same thing and expect a different result, you know, we do see a lot of that. So you have to try and bring people back from that as well, but use that to your advantage by saying, okay, well, we've tried this before and it didn't work. Maybe we would try something different.
And it was funny, I spoke to Daniel Whiffen, it'd be out this Wednesday, and I asked him, is it boring? Is doing the same thing over and over again boring? And he said, no, because I love it. But is it boring? Is high performance, you know, that buzzword now, elite sport, doing the same thing, you know, every day, consistency, is it really boring?
I mean, I suppose you have to look at where an athlete is in their career as well. So if you've got somebody who's just come to their first Olympics, what they're doing, they're maybe 3 or 4 years in. Whereas if you've got somebody who's been at a cycle, this is their 3rd or 4th Olympics, they've now maybe got family commitments. It's different. The pressures are different. I would say it'll depend on where you're at in your career. I mean, I remember listening to Michael Phelps, and I mean, he did say that towards the end of it, I mean, you know, he hated going to Colorado for altitude, you know, swimming hundreds of laps every day, the same day, you know, like it became, but he knew he had to do it. Yeah. So he wouldn't have said it's the most exciting thing in the world. He said it was lonely. He had to leave his family, but he knew he had to do it. And I suppose that was interesting because that was at a conference. I'd been to Colorado Springs to the boxers because Billy Walsh had been there, and the conference was there. So he was in Colorado again, and I think it was the first time he'd been back since, you know, I'm not sure if he had a bit of PTSD, but I mean, he didn't enjoy it, but he knew he had to do it. Yeah. And I think if you speak to athletes at various stages in their career, you might find that it changes depending on where they're at in their life.
It's a great point. And different people find the joy in different things. Daniel loves swimming, so he said, I love being in the pool. I dream about my races in the pool, outside the pool. And it's just different for everyone. Everyone's different. I'd love to know, from your perspective, working with Irish athletes and comparing them with everyone, what's the traits of the really elite ones? I asked Gavin the same question. He gave me a great anecdote about Kelly. Is there anything that stands out to you in any athlete you've seen, the traits or the personality that allows them to be the best?
They are different. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's just the reality, and they can sustain and do things that nobody else would have the staying power for. And I mean, you know, they can be difficult, but I mean, most of us can be difficult, but they're difficult for a reason, you know. But I mean, I think and that's not the case with everybody, and it might just be the cases in various different at times, you know. But they're under a lot of pressure as well, and I mean, that's the reality. But I mean, they do things that nobody else would or could do, and that's just the reality. And they are different, and different gravy, isn't that what they say?
Yeah, exactly. So is there, when we talk about different gravy, to break it down even further, is there a certain trait, do you think, in terms of, or even it's their level of training, like what separates them when we're talking about different gravy? Is it that mindset, or is it personality, or?
Could be a bit of all of those things. I mean, and again, some of the things that they have to do is hard, you know, and people sometimes talk a good story around wanting to do the hard things, but actually sometimes they don't, you know. So you kind of, you know, the ones that will do it and they consistently do it, you know, and also, okay, sometimes you think they're not listening, but they are actually listening to small things. And what they're doing is they're taking the information and thinking, right, what can I get this out of this myself? It's maybe not exactly what I've said or what somebody else has said, but they're taking the nuggets from lots of different places and going, right, I actually think this will work for me.
One of the things I've kind of put together a couple of learnings from the podcast in the last while, and Am I right in thinking that elite athletes are nearly like entrepreneurs, where they spot the gaps, their weaknesses, and try fill it, whether it's information from you or you've sparked something or they find somebody to help? Do they have that bit of an entrepreneurial mindset?
Probably do, because some of them will become businesses, they are, and that's, I suppose, it's in their nature, it's in their best interest probably that, they're thinking about the things that is going to make them either have the longevity or perform better. And I mean, it's going to take different things for different people at different phases in their life as well, and I think it's knowing that some of the things when it's going to be really important for them to do that, or reflect on things that, it's that reflection piece as well, I would say, and the ones that have reflect and go, that didn't work for me, Sharon, and we got to find something else that did or will, because that's not working. Or again, you're reflecting back and going to them, well, I mean, if you continue to do this, I mean, we're going to get the same outcome here. And that, again, it's, if they're able to then change and move those things on, I mean, that's where you get the differences, really.
Can you spot a young kid that, and in general terms, obviously barring injury and different things, and say they have a really good chance of making it?
I don't really go out kind of to do that, not necessarily, no. I mean, I think there's lots of things that kind of come into the environment, that you potentially, it's easier to spot the ones that's not going to do it. I'm not sure I have the skill set to spot the ones that are going to, but you can get senses where you just feel, I'm not sure this is going to work.
And is that from a work ethic point of view, or different things?
No, I think it's different things, and it's different things for different people as well, and there's no one thing. I mean, there's almost like a sense, isn't it, really, rather than actual any facts and figures. The science is maybe not behind that. That's a good PhD study there, isn't it?
There you go. Yeah, someone listening wants to do that. And that was one thing I discussed a little bit with Dr. Jo Brown, who's performance coach with Noel Lyles, and I asked her about, are we putting too much on kids now, or are we looking for them to be professionals? She made the point of, she had a 10-year-old tennis player that wanted to become a professional, was that the kid or the parents, but are we putting too much pressure on finding the next big thing? Like, even me asking you there, I was sort of like, God, well, I probably should change my language around that. Are we too much looking at too quick who's going to be the next big thing, who's professional already?
I think so. I mean, I don't think it, as we go back to that, elite sport is not good for your health. So, I mean, I don't think, I wouldn't want to put any kids into that. I mean, it takes a certain type of person to survive in this and to be able to survive well at the other side, and I just don't know that, it's for everybody, and it's not for everybody, and I think people get blinded by all the nice stuff, but there's a lot of, I mean, if you spoke to the Nadals and they have got obviously they've won lots of things. I mean, if you speak to any elite athlete, or anyone that's successful, I mean, even the Michael Phelps, I mean, there's a lot of grey there, a lot of black and dark, and he would have admitted that many times, so I'm not sure that, it all looks great from the outside. I mean, for me, I think it's interesting because we're lucky enough now that a lot of universities do have, elite athlete pathways and stuff like that. Whereas a lot of athletes used to go to America to, NCAA and stuff like that. Do we want to be sending our kids at that age across the world?
To a system that can chew people up and spit them out.
And they do. I wouldn't, in my wildest dreams, want to send anybody in, because you're just a number on a conveyor belt. And the long term, I just don't, I personally don't think I prefer that our athletes stayed close by.
And do you think there will be an evolution to that, to minding the athlete and being less of a system, let's say in the likes of America, that chew them up and spit them out? Would you think that will happen, or are we just going to continue in the path we are now?
No, I mean, I think the fact that there are pathways and, there's investment and people can make a career out of it. I mean, I think all of that's very positive. We get blinded by, you know, what that might be. The grass is always greener, isn't it? You know, and it's, again, at the end of the day, professional sport is professional sport. And, you know, people have to make you know, it's a money-making exercise, and when you bring that into it, I mean, sometimes welfare is secondary to that.
There was a great quote there from a basketball player in America. She was at Iowa State, and a lot of people asked, will you transfer, will you leave and go to a bigger school? And she said, the grass is greener where you water it. And she's going to stay. What does it mean? You mentioned the word professional. What does it mean to be a professional?
Well, I mean, I think the athletes that we have in here and the athletes that, you know, are professional, I mean, you go about your business in a professional way, and that you turn up, you do what you're supposed to do, and you put everything, you know, you're not going to not show up for things. And getting paid doesn't necessarily mean that you're not a professional. So I don't know that money's the answer, you know. I think that there's a thought process that just because, you know, an NBA team or a Premiership team does something, that's the be-all and end-all. I'm not sure that that's actually the case, because sometimes some of the rigour around selection of who's working with who, I mean, could be a little bit, you know, you'd have to question that sometimes as well. Okay. Now, that has improved significantly across, and we have now systems in place like accreditations and, you know, systems in place to try and make sure that people that are working with athletes in those environments are as professional as we can have them, that there's accountability, that if advice is given that's not good, that, you know, whereas in the past that wasn't necessarily the case.
What makes a really great coach or a great practitioner from your point of view? I'm interested to hear, because you would have seen a lot of coaches, a lot of athletes, practitioners. What makes a great coach?
Good communication, can read the room, knowing when to hold, when to fold, and when to walk away. I think there's sometimes practitioners feel that they have to earn their keep a little bit, and sometimes the best place for them is out the door. You know, if you not need to be involved in something, don't be involved in it.
That's a great point.
Go in the opposite direction. Yeah. I have gone into situations I've seen, and I've literally done a U-turn and gone out the other side, you know. So there's those kind of, but again, that kind of comes with, you know, with time, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally. When you look at measuring success within your role, how do you measure success?
Oh, that's very hard. Yeah, I've thought my measure of success is probably not the measure that you would think. I've had athletes who we didn't think that they could ever have family, and they have. So they're kind of my measures of success. If they can hang up whatever equipment they have, and they come out the other side and they enjoy food and they have a good relationship with it, and, you know, they're healthy in the long term, that's kind of the measure of success. In so far as I can educate them to do that. I suppose the difficulty is if we can't, or the listening and hearing bit, there's only so much we can do, you know, but it's also accepting that that's the reality, and you're not going to win all of those battles.
Bigger than sport is how you measure it.
Oh, 100%, yeah, absolutely. End off. That's my most, you know, I met an athlete not that long ago, actually in Gaelic football, and I'd worked with him many, many years ago, and he's now coaching at a minor level, and he said to me, he says, you know, Sharon, you made me recognise that I didn't have to starve myself, because everybody was focused on my weight. And he said, I have a great relationship with food now, and he said, that was because of you. So for me, that's more important than, you know, the medals or the championships or whatever.
Amazing. When we look at GAA very quickly, I know you've worked with GAA teams before, are we squeezing too much?
It's very hard. Just look at the injury profile. It's really, really difficult to do what they're doing in this very condensed You know, it's massively congested, and I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I think they've looked at it a number of different ways, but I mean, you've got massive injury, and a lot of that is the sheer volume of training. I mean, that is huge, and from my point of view, the fueling of that is massive, and the time, the barriers to this. I mean, they have to work, they have to sleep, they have to train. Where do they get the time to cook, shop? You know, they're all afraid to eat too much in case it has an impact on their physicality, and that's the messaging that's out there. And then we look at, you know, the injury profiles, and I mean, the reality is we've got underfueling issues known as REDS, energy availability issues, and we do know that the bedrock of a lot of injuries and a lot of sickness is underfueling.
Yeah, I do know of a ladies inter-county team that moved away from those early morning sessions on the weekend to an afternoon session because of the injury rates, and at the end of it, it was fueling. Players didn't have breakfast and were going out doing a 2-hour session.
And I mean, what you're looking at, there's this kind of assumption that if you train on a Friday night, that's Friday's done and dusted. But if you train on a Friday night at 7 o'clock and you're back in training at Saturday morning at 9, that's 2 sessions in a less than a 10-hour gap, 12-hour gap. But they haven't thought about that because they believe that there's this really magic switch at 12 midnight that kind of resets everything. And then there's a really, really magic switch on a Sunday night at 12 midnight that resets the whole week. Doesn't? So the bony injuries, the soft tissue injuries, the repeated colds, tonsillitis, you know, all of these things. I mean, you're just not that unlucky. You go back and you investigate and you look, and I mean, we see profiles, it's not healthy to eat late at night because, so I mean, they're having their dinner at 5 or 6 before they go to that training session, and then they eat nothing afterwards, and then they go to the first session in the morning. So basically, not only have they the 12 hours, but they fasted for 15 or 16 hours with 2 sessions in that time as well.
As you say, you're not that unlucky. There's clues everywhere.
Yeah, they're just not, either they don't know, they haven't been educated, or they're getting messages around. And I mean, that comes back to that context piece as well, and what is professional or what is healthy. It's different for different people. I mean, what's healthy for me is absolutely, yes, that beautiful salad plate with lots of colours. But if I've gone out and ran 10k, you know, pomegranate and rocket and tomatoes is not going to cut the mustard. It looks great on Instagram or TikTok. I mean, there's clues all over the place, and then you're wondering why you've got injured.
And my big thing, particularly in GAA, and I remember asking a strength conditioning coach this, and she worked with the RFU, and I said, what's the hardest thing about being a professional in an amateur setup? Because outside of training, it is amateur. And I think the next evolution is we look at managers and professionalism, because we have associations now for players, for physios, for nutrition, for everything, except for managers. So you go in, and I go in 1 year with a team, and then a new manager comes in, it's totally different. And it makes, I think we base our decisions off our experience and our feel as, let's say, a manager. But the reality is you're not a professional. You don't have the science and the expertise that the professionals that you are employing who answer to you have. So I think we're at the top, we're limiting our setups because we don't have a professional in there.
And we have to remember that particularly in some of the science element of things, people bring their baggage with them. So that's a massive influence, you know, and sometimes that doesn't suit, you know, it's not in the context of where, so what a manager or support team are doing, you know, is very different to what, and it comes back to that piece around retirement and stuff like that. I mean, you know, people, coaches and support teams with baggage that they've brought through their lives, you know, then influencing athletes as well.
I do want to ask about, what's the biggest misconception about elite athletes?
Oh God, I don't know. That they do everything perfectly, I suppose.
That could be, yeah, one of the many things.
But what is perfect? That's the crux of the question, because in the context of the training load, it might actually not be perfect. And that brings me back to that piece around perfectionism. You know, the context is not right potentially for what they're trying to do.
Give us a few. I'm thinking of basketball. Like, it always gives that an example. It's not like I'm throwing them under the bus every time, but the reality is it's underfunded. We don't have a lot of services, support. Give us a couple of free tips to bring together, like to cultivate a high performance environment. Is there anything that you've spotted over the years that's free or cheap to kind of bring a professional setup together?
Make sure you feed them after training. Make sure you feed them before training. If you're, you know, some small things like that can make a big difference, because I mean, again, people say, but that costs. But if you've a couple of your best players out with an injury, that's a big cost. So it's depending on what you value in your cost system. People are very happy to spend huge amounts of money on MRI scans and, you know, all of this, but actually be proactive. Don't let them go down that route. I mean, breakfast is really cheap. If you look at it, you could put porridge or cereal and bananas on, and, you know, it's not that expensive in the big scheme of things. And actually your value for money return is huge.
Yeah, it's the cost of the breakfast versus the MRI.
€400 would go a long way for a squad of, you know, 20.
Yeah, that's true. Gavin gave a bit of an insight into the detail of your work in terms of Paris, the measuring, the how loud the aircon would be and the weight of the bed sheets. Give us an insight into, for the likes of myself and people listening, the general public that don't understand the detail and the lengths that these, you know, the pieces of information that you're building for, let's say, for LA or other competitions. Give us an insight into any other things you do that are just would shock us that we don't have a concept of.
I mean, it's that piece around getting the basics of life, you know, right. Because if you can sleep well, if you can eat well, and, you know, they're going to be big pillars in terms of your performance. And for a lot of people, sleeping in the heat is a real difficult, you know, it's very difficult. And the reality is that athletes are going to have to, we're all going to have to get used to doing that, because air conditioning is, even if you go to hotels now in Europe, I mean, the AC's 5 degrees less than what the temperature is outside, you know, so you're not going to be able to go in and ramp down your AC in places. So we've got our environmental chamber here where, you know, there's a lot more kind of acclimatization to certain things then as well. I mean, things like cooling strategies, you know, slushies. Again, here's a perfect example of out of context. I mean, there was some work published recently around slushies causing glycerol poisoning for youngsters. Absolutely wouldn't have them within a country mile, but actually we have a slushy machine here so that whenever the summer comes, we're actually training athletes to get used to that cooling type of thing. I mean, we've done dental work because again, the advice around fueling and stuff for athletes is eat frequently, carbohydrate based. You know, these are the things that have big impacts on dental health. And, you know, athletes get dental problems at major games. That can throw out all sorts of issues, you know. So we had dentists doing assessments of as part of a research study, and we'd hopefully then be able to continue on, you know, because again, things like Invisalign and these things, I mean, if you're wearing them in the pool, that can cause major problems, you know. Again, if you're wearing gum shields, or if you're those types of things, I mean, impacts, it can cause problems in terms of, you know, concussions and stuff like that. So just, again, education, awareness around dental health, simple strategy can make big difference as well in terms of performance. We have a sleep referral system here, so if you have athletes that are and again, it could be as simple as an athlete's actually going to bed too early, would you believe, and then they have a big row with themselves in the bed because they're not getting to sleep. And actually our practitioners who do work with them, you know, sometimes what you're doing is actually sending them to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and getting them up again at 6, but trying to work that back then so that they're not, you know, basically warfare isn't happening in the bedroom. You know, so some simple strategies around that can make difference. The gut doesn't like to travel. It doesn't like the heat. And I mean, there's some serious issues around gut issues. So again, making sure that they don't get sick while they're away. If they do have issues when they fly, and we don't often fly with them, but your gut blows up like a balloon when you fly, and then what you find is for 2 or 3 days afterwards, athletes struggle with their guts. But then when they come back, they forget all about that, and we try and establish those type of things beforehand. And the gut doesn't like heat either.
Yeah. So then when you're travelling to heat, to pressure, to expectation, it's a cocktail for sometimes.
Oh,
yeah.
Hiding to nothing there.
Yeah. I do want to ask, if you 4-year cycle to LA, what's the biggest challenge with a 4-year cycle? Is it too much time, too little time?
It's just about right. I think you have a year where everybody recovers from the year out, and then different sports have different qualification strategies. Excuse me. So if you have a sport like triathlon or judo, they have a 2-year qualification. They work on it's almost like they're on a tour for 2 years collecting points. It's a long time. Whereas then if you've got boxing or or athletics, you meet a criteria or a standard within a year or 12 months or 14 months or whatever, you've qualified. Now the difficulty is for something like boxing, you qualify the weight.
Yes.
So you have to stay at that weight then for a period of time. You can't send somebody else in their place.
Yeah.
Whereas in rowing, now lightweight has gone, but you qualified the boat, and sailing would be the same. You qualify the boat, but you could switch around.
The athletes. Very good. Okay. In terms of it's in the end of March coming into April. What's in the planning process now when we look to 2028, 2032? Is there, how much looking ahead do you do in this period, or are you still on the wind down from the last games?
No, I mean, the wind down's gone. It's over. It's wound up now again, and a lot of sports will have pathway programs. I suppose that's you're looking for the next big thing, isn't it? But giving those athletes opportunities to go to major competitions. We'll have European Games in a couple of years. Each sport will have their own World Championships, European Games, stuff like that. So, I mean, you're looking at developing athletes and giving them exposure at major competitions over the next couple of years, and then obviously they'll be planning. LA is going to be very different. It's not going to be in one place. There'll be multiple challenges across, service provision in those sports, and again, obviously, what sports are going to qualify.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, it's trying to find who's going to be there. When you look at I'm interested in that group that you're part of, the wider group with other countries. Who do you learn from in terms of implementing strategies within Team Ireland? Is there anyone that you look to and learn from?
I mean, I suppose it depends on what it is, really. That group, there would be a couple of nutritionists and dietitians and scientists that we'd kind of continue on with, and actually as part of a wider group with Australia and America, we're looking at even things like education around body composition and disordered eating and eating disorders. So I mean, you probably find whatever tribe you think is going to help, and you can discuss things. So I mean, there'd be a variety of different groups that you learn from, and they learn from you, and we've developed good relationships with countries as well, and actually built that into maybe a little bit of planning around maybe doing some research into different things and using different countries to come together and increase that kind of athlete pool as well.
So the painting I'm trying to give to people listening is, the reality is we're now the eyes aren't on Team Ireland because it's not an Olympic year, and I hate the way we don't look at it. I think the European Games needs more attention as well. But the reality is there's a lot of work being going on behind the scenes at the moment, preparing for the next competition, whatever that is, plus a lot of collaboration with other countries. So we're in a very busy period, really.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be different at different times as well within that, and it'll peak and trough. But I mean, reality is now we're back to work, doing the day-to-day stuff and keeping athletes healthy and well, and trying to get them on their podiums for whatever sports and whatever their big thing is for the next 12 months as well.
Brilliant. What was the biggest lesson you learned from Paris to bring into the European or the Olympic Games?
I mean, I think we can deliver, this, and one of our, I suppose, is our size. I mean, people think bigger is better, not necessarily, and I think that is one of our the positive things. We're small. We're, you know, relative to other countries, we will continue to be small, but we are growing. And I mean, I think it's and what we're doing is we're probably upskilling practitioners as we go along to hopefully be able to be those people of the future that will be, you know, LA, Brisbane, wherever.
And beyond. Yeah. In terms of when you're building a team, you've 8 staff members now. What do you look for in a prospective employee?
I mean, how they can fit within the bigger team as well, you know, personality, communication, crack, all of those things are really important, you know, not take themselves too seriously, just be able to do a good job, offer different solutions. If I'm not the person in a sport, I want to be able to find somebody that's going to do a better job.
When you look to, let's say, 10 years, maybe 20 years down the line, where's the next evolution, do you think, within the Irish sporting landscape? That's a very broad question on purpose.
Well, I mean, I think it's just being able to deliver on all of these things consistently and building, you know, from the things that work really well. And I mean, for me, it's not very sexy things. It's really simple things done well that make the difference, you know. I mean, who knew that actually feeding people at the right time, you know, there's no app for that. Do you know what I mean? And again, the interesting thing for me is that everybody has their hands on so much information. You could Google whatever you want, ChatGPT, whatever you want, you will get an answer for. People don't know what to do with it. So actually they're in a worse position a lot of the time because they don't understand the context of them as an individual.
Yeah, it's the information overload. Oh God, what am I doing with all this?
And they're seeing it, and you know, ChatGPT will only be as good as the information that they're being pumped in. If somebody can't see that, you know, they have an eating disorder themselves, I mean, they're not going to know that that's not the information that they need to get back out again. Yeah. So that's where your practitioners are really important as well.
In terms of your role, I'd love to know, what will your legacy be when you do? I'm not retiring just yet. When you do finish, what would you like your legacy to be?
That we developed, I mean, multidisciplinary practitioners that work together. That, I mean, I don't want us to go back to the way it was 20 years ago, where people like myself were working on their own in silos with athletes or coaches, you know, that weren't able to learn from other people. You know, this is where it's at. And I mean, we can go through many, you can see it has happened where, you know, AIS have gone back to that model where they've got practitioners working within sports. I mean, there's no cover there. Sports may not value them. They'll say, oh, well, sure, we'll just get somebody that's out of university. They need to be on a journey where they've got somebody to mentor them, to understand that, you know, sometimes saying no is okay, but I don't want us to go back to that place, you know. And you can see it's happened a little bit across the water, and I mean, that would be, for me, a step backwards around, otherwise you're not going to develop practitioners. That's why we still have gaps in some of the practitioners, because they were never given the opportunity to work as part of a team, and that's crucial.
And without the practitioners, we can't support the athletes and continue to drive on.
Well, you can to a certain extent, but you're not going to have the quality there.
Yeah, okay, very good point. I'm going to move on. I'm going to bring this to a close because I feel like we could be here for hours. We're going to run through quickly the Sideline 7, same 7 questions at the end of every episode. Sharon, what's your favourite quote?
I do like the know when to hold, fold and walk away.
Who said that? That was very good.
It's what you call the song, the Gambler, isn't it?
Oh, okay. I wouldn't be familiar with it now, but I'd be interested to check it out.
I'm not a country and western fan, but
very good. Do you want to ask, best sporting event you've been to? Pick one as a fan, one that you've been involved in.
Actually, an under 16 basketball team that I coached, and we got to final in the league finals, and I mean they played fantastically. We lost. I can't remember who it was to now, but that was one that was involved in, and that was very much not as a nutritionist. And I suppose I have to say the semi-final and final of the men's basketball,
unreal,
in Paris.
Have you watched Court of Gold?
Yes,
Amazing.
and starting 5 as well.
Oh, amazing.
So
Brilliant.
right in the middle of that. And actually, we ended up courtside by complete mistake, because we'd been in at the semi-final, I said, let's go to block 7. They were throwing us out of block 7. They said, you can't sit there. And we said, no, we can't sit here. And they said, no, you have to move over there. So we went the whole way around, and this lady said, oh, I love your gear. So I give her some pins, and then they wouldn't let us through. She says, go through that door there. And they said, you can't go through that door. And I said, but that lady there said, and she says, oh, let them in. And it was literally courtside. We walked past them all, and
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
I could have been warming up.
Question 4, biggest achievement to date?
My kids, I suppose. Still married, just about. And working in sport, that's difficult, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Looking back, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
Get as many experiences as you can, because all of those give you, I think that's part, a lot of people want to just go straight to whatever, but everything that you do, you can bring that back into I've learned things working with people that are dying, which is much more important. Working with an athlete who thinks that the world has ended, you're going to be able to bring skills in there so every experience is important, even though it might not be what you think is the end point, but you will still learn from that.
Brilliant. Question 6, who would be your dream dinner guest and why?
Ooh, well, I suppose I'd need to say the husband first, but anyway, in terms of dream dinner guest, oh my goodness, that's a really hard.
You can have a dinner party, everyone cheats.
Muhammad Ali, I think, would be there, just because of, his conversation would be pretty awesome. Some of the basketballers, I definitely have some of them there as well. I actually think Martina Navratilova, I'd like to have dinner with her as well. I really love the tennis. And she was definitely an idol growing up, so I think somebody like her would be good in there too, because I think she'd mix it up a wee bit.
Yeah, exactly. Final question, if your life was a book, what chapter would this be called?
Oh my God.
I should have given you the questions before, sorry.
Chapter, there's still lots of chapters left, I think. Midpoint, maybe 20 chapters? Well, maybe 11 or 12, I suppose, be in there.
Brilliant. Sharon, thanks a million and best of luck.
Thank you, Orla.